Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I'm going to be showing you guys how I made these little resin art toy figurines. I've been seeing some really adorable illustrations of tea bags online with all these little adorable things inside, and I just wanted to make that a 3D item that I could hold in my hands. I didn't really know how I was going to do it. I had a basic idea of how I would get it done, but they came out exactly how I wanted, which rarely happens, and I figured it out, and I'm going to show you guys how I did it. But first, let me just show you how cute these came out. We're going to start the sculpture off by making the armature. It looks like a tiny tinfoil tombstone, but just roll with it. This armature is going to help in two ways. It's going to give us a nice base to start putting our clay on. It's also going to help prevent the polymer clay from cracking in the oven. If polymer clay is too thick without an armature and put in the oven to bake, it will most likely crack, and we don't want that. So here you can just see me adding a sheet of polymer clay and attaching it to the armature and making sure there's no air pockets or bubbles between the tinfoil and the clay, because that can also cause issues while baking, and you want it to really be secure to that armature. I'm just adding more sheets of clay and kind of building it up to get the shape that I want. And of course, smoothing it out. Lots of smoothing. Here I'm adding it to the bottom, another sheet of clay. I'm just going to cut that out with my X-Acto knife. Then I'll attach the bottom to the rest of the sculpture so it looks like one piece. I know it's looking like just a gray blob right now, but we have to trust the process. We're going to call this the ugly phase. And if you see any places that need more clay, just get some bits of clay and add it in and smooth it out. Here I'm going to start adding the features to make it look more like a tea bag. This is going to be kind of where those side pointy edges of the tea bag are. I'm going to make this a little exaggerated and a little bigger and more cartoony than a real tea bag, since this is more for fun. And I also need to be able to fit the glitter insert inside of it as well. And here you can see it's looking more like an envelope shape that they kind of have. And then I'll add the sculpted details. Here I went a little too deep and I hit my tinfoil armature, and I'm just going to bury that like my feelings and pretend it didn't happen. Now we're getting more of a cute little tea bag shape. Now we're going to start adding those little details in so it's not so boring. This is also going to help it look more like a tea bag instead of a gray blob. Here we're going to add in our staple on the back because we're going to be adding a tag to this as well. The front was looking really boring, so I wanted to add these little sculpted details, and they made a huge difference. Now if you mess up while doing this, just smooth it out with your finger and try again. No big deal. I actually just realized I don't have any footage of me sculpting the staple on the back, but I'm pretty sure you guys can use your imagination. It's not very exciting to sculpt a staple. I just rolled a little piece of clay, kind of like a spaghetti noodle, and cut it to size to fit in the groove where the staple is. Now that my sculpture's done, I'm going to use some clay softener to just smooth out the entire piece, get rid of my fingerprints, any lint, and it just smooths out all the detail. Then I'm going to pop this in the oven and bake it according to the directions. Now I can sand it after it's baked. I'm starting with a lower grit and working to a higher grit. I want to get all the imperfections out and smooth it out really nicely. Here it is all sanded and smoothed. If your surface isn't smooth, when you go to mold it, it's going to pick up all those flaws. Now I'm going to use some polymer clay to kind of map out where I want my tag to be. I wasn't sure on the position, so I just made a little mock-up and tried it out. Once I figured out the position that I liked, I'm going to use some Epoxy Sculpt to make the actual tag. The sculpture itself was so smooth that polymer clay was not sticking to it, but the nice thing about this two-part epoxy is that it has a little bit of stickiness to it. So you just want to mix the two parts together really well until you get one solid color. And here I am just rolling out the string for my tag. Now I'm really making sure it's kind of stuck on the sculpture. I don't want it to fall off. I've created my tag, and now I'm just going to make sure that it's stuck to the piece itself. I want this to look like one cohesive piece, and doing this will help it from breaking off when it dries, and also giving it a really nice smooth appearance when I mold it. I'm using safety solvent, which is kind of like clay softener, but for this epoxy sculpt, and smoothing it out like I did before. This is going to help when it comes to sanding it after it dries. Now that it's all on there nice and smooth, I can let it dry. Now, of course, it's time for more sanding. I'm starting off again with a lower grit, moving to a higher grit so it's nice and smooth. Now that the sculpture is all sanded, it is ready to be molded. I'm going to use a 2-part silicone mold here. This silicone is going to take 4 hours to cure, and then I can demold it and see what the inside of the mold is going to look like. Here I'm just going to pull out the original sculpture and make sure that it captured all the detail and that there's no bubbles or anything wrong with the mold. Here we can see that all that detail transferred and our mold looks really good. It will pick up the tiniest of details. Now I'm going to start making the insert. This insert is going to fit into the mold of our original sculpture, and this is where I'm going to put all the glitter and effects inside of this. I wanted it to look like it was actually inside of the tea bag. See, you can see it follows the shape, and it's going to fit right inside. So I've created that insert, and I'm just going to, of course, sand the life out of it. Now that it's all sanded up and smooth, we have both of our pieces. And now you can see how the insert fits really nicely into our larger sculpture. Now I'm going to mold up the inserts as well. I also duplicated my molds because I'll be using epoxy, and that takes a lot longer than urethane resins. Now it's time for the fun part with glitters, glow powders, colorants, and all that stuff. I'm going to be using a 2-part epoxy. You can see all the swirls in the resin. You need to keep mixing gently until all those are gone, and you get a nice clear resin just like this. Now you can add all the fun stuff. I'm using pink for this first one, adding the glitter, stirring gently. Now to the blue. I love this glitter. Mix those up really well. I let them sit so they can thicken up a bit. If you don't let it thicken like this, the glitter can tend to fall, the heavier glitter especially, and just be at the bottom of your mold. I wanted glitter all the way through, so I let these get a bit thick before pouring them in. I'm going to be curing these under pressure. It helps with the bubbles. Now that they're cured, I can take them out, and let's have a look. Came out really nicely. The glitter's nice and dispersed and not stuck at the top. Looking good. Now I have to figure out how to get this insert to sit where I want it to in the mold like this without floating to the top. So I figured out how to make these little brackets to hold them exactly where I want them. I'm using my UV light to kind of flash cure these and getting it to the height that I want. I also use my UV light to cure them, and you can see the little bumps. Now I'm going to make the little bracket. And I also learned you need to sand these, because I was trying to add the bracket on without sanding them and it just kept sliding all over the place. So now it's nice and flat, and I can just use some UV resin to attach the bracket. I know this system's a little weird, but it was the only way I could think to logistically get this to work. I'm starting off with one bracket here. I eventually moved to two, but you can see it holds it in place where I need it to and keeps it a little bit lower so the whole piece is covered in resin. Now I'm mixing up a big batch of epoxy resin, adding some very fine glitter. It's gonna look really neat in the final product. I'm just filling up my mold about halfway, maybe more than halfway. Then we put in our insert and add the rest of the resin. One bracket was okay, but two makes it much more stable and level. But I'm just figuring this out as I go and hoping this all works out. Then I'm going to add the rest of the resin. Sometimes bubbles would get caught underneath the bracket, so I just fish those out with a tool. Get those out, now they're all nice and filled, and I can put them in my pressure pot to cure. Let's see what our first look is. And it looks amazing. I was so happy at this moment because everything was just kind of a logistical thought, and now I knew that my idea actually worked. Let's see the blue. And I love it. I was so happy that it actually worked. Here we are with the two brackets, much more stable, much more level. More work, but the result was worth it. And then I realized I could just snap these off, and sometimes I can get them off in one piece and then I could reuse them. Here's some honeybees in one of the inserts. These got a little stuck at the top, but I actually really liked how that looked. And I just love how that insert just kind of floats in there and looks really neat. And a little trick I have is when your molds get dirty with lint or pieces of resin, I use some Scotch tape. You could probably use a lint roller too, and it just picks it right up. This is a good way to keep your molds clean. You don't want contaminants in your molds. I'd like to share this piece I got from Verdant Sculpts. It's called a MOSSUM, and I just love it. Look at all that moss detail. This is the patina version. Isn't it gorgeous? Verdant Sculpt's work is absolutely incredible, and he's one of the artists that inspired me to do what I do. And I just love collecting his pieces. They are absolutely gorgeous. His sculpting is amazing, and he has his own YouTube channel as well. I'll link his shop and his YouTube channel below as well. Look how cute it is hanging off of this plant. Isn't it adorable? I've just been moving it around my whole house. Look at the painted version. I mean, how cute are these little MOSSUMs? Adorable. Let's start demolding these and seeing what they look like. This one was really fun. The stars are actually black light reactive. This purple one is really lush. I loved this one. The white part actually glows white, and the ghost looks so cool with the glow. This pastel one was just so cute. This heart one, actually the background, the white part glowed blue, and then we have some dragonflies. These stars glowed. Some cute paws, and I love the holo effect. Now you can see we have a little bit of a problem here. It needs to be domed. You can see on the right, that one is domed. So I need to dome the rest. First thing I gotta do is sand that area. I've had some issues of sometimes having the UV resin try to delaminate. Here I'm just using UV resin to fill in those low areas. You probably don't have to sand, but I was just being extra careful. Sometimes my UV resin can be a bit weird. Using my UV light to flash cure, and then I'm finishing the cure in a larger UV lamp. This one's for nails. I did try to dome with epoxy, and I should have known better. It never goes well for me, and here it created a huge mess. I was really worried I wouldn't be able to fix these and get them to the standard that I expect from my work, so I did end up remaking some of them, but I decided to try and fix them. I was pretty upset and contemplating just throwing all my art supplies out the window. And of course, you know, this is going to take just so much sanding. I have this nice little sanding tool. I don't know where I got it. I've stabbed myself with it about 50 times, so just be careful. And it's gonna help me get that detail back and those ridges back, which is what I was most concerned about. But luckily this tool really just was able to get all of those tiny details back and sand it into the resin itself. And once I was done sanding, you really couldn't even tell that anything happened. Here's the before, and here's the after. And after glossing these, they looked perfect. Now that they're all done, I need to sand them, of course. Why not? More sanding. Here I'm just sanding the bottoms flat, making sure that it's even and I'm not taking off too much. Here they are all sanded. Now they need a nice bath. And it's time to paint the tags. This part was very finicky and I held my breath a lot while painting these. After painting these tags, I will spray them with matte varnish to protect the paint. Here I'm just outlining the tags so it sticks out a little bit more. stands out a little bit more. And here's a gloss on the right and a matte on the left. I really love the matte, and I love the shiny tag. It gives it a little peekaboo effect. Here's the matte. Doesn't that look nice? And here I did a little test tag to see if the charm looked good, and I loved that look. I'm using these little charms. They're actually for nail art, and they come in so many different shapes. So I picked out ones that match the inside glitter. I sanded the tag a little bit before adding some UV resin, and then I just pop the charm on there and push it into that UV resin. And then I just push the UV resin around on the tag, making sure not to spill any over the edge. I used a lighter here to pop some surface bubbles. Be careful not to burn anything or yourself. And then using the UV lamp and torch to set it. And here's some cute little tag designs. Look at that glow. I love the peekaboo effect that these tags give. It kind of magnifies and shows the glitter inside, and I love that mixed with the matte. And here they are, all complete. I'll show you some of the glow effects at the very end.